I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's sessions as well. I know Kirsten's session was earlier today, and I know folks joined her. And I want to thank you all who joined Stacy, Renee, and I, Robin, Renee, and I, for our session just a few moments ago. And we're super grateful to you all. Um, this week has been filled with so much deep, rigorous study, so much thought, intention, and engagement. And I just want to create a space where we can reflect on some of those things, but also think about how we can take some of these things with us into our work, and what it looks like to take these things with us into our work. Let me just share briefly some moments that I took a few notes, which is something I don't normally do, which is read my notes. But I took some notes from the session with the mothers because it was so impactful and so powerful for me. And I don't know for folks who do know me or don't, I am a Black mothering scholar. It was the work that I did for my dissertation. It was the work that was the most healing and transformative for me in my own personal life. But the talk with Dr. Roberts was entitled Embodied Pedagogies, Memories, Mothering, and Making Through Grief. And we were joined by Cleopatra Crawley Pendleton, Michelle Kennedy, Tamika Palmer, and Samaria Rice, all the mothers of children who were slain by agents of the state, killed through state violence. Some of what most stood out for me in those sessions and in those moments were the memories that these mothers shared. Thinking about Hadia Pendleton's mother, who said that when she shares memories of Hadia, she shares memories that remind her that her child actually did live a life. She talked about all the conversations that she has of her child having to be in past tense because her child is no longer with her, and how when folks think about these children, they often write about her. For instance, her daughter was the 43rd person killed that year, and she says that other folks read her child as a statistic, but she says, what does it mean to be the statistics mother, right? And that reflection was so exceedingly powerful for me. Michelle Kennedy, the mother of Antoine Rose, talked about him being an artist and him, painting the walls in her house. And when he was killed, she felt that it was her duty, her mission, to remind everyone who he was, and also to ensure that nobody forgot what happened to him. Nobody forgot what the state had done to him. Tamika Palmer talked about Breonna Taylor, her daughter, who loved to sing. And she says that Breonna could light up a room, and that she battles with the ideas of what to do with this grief and how to use it for purpose, because she said she shouldn't be living through this grief. Her daughter should still be alive. And how powerful and important that was for me. And I close with the sessions with Mrs. Rice, who says, my son was 12 years old, but he was only 12 for 5 months. What does it mean to be 12 years old for 5 months? She said he was a kid. He was just a kid. He liked to play with toys. He was a child. And he was a soft, gentle, tender child. She said her baby still loved to be hugged and kissed, and how rare it is for a 12-year-old to still want their mother to hug and kiss them. She talked about being a militant who was committed to dismantling systems of violence, committed to abolishing the police and other violent systems, and bringing something in its place that was useful for us. I think about Dr. Vaught's session with Erica Miner and Dr. One, and they talked about how anti-Blackness structures the society, this idea of warfare, and how liberalizing, reforming, or destroying these systems are the options that folks are often left with, and often they choose the easier path, which is to liberalize them or reform them, and how a commitment to a practice involves more than that. There are multiple moments from this conference that stuck with me, that shook me to my core. Even our last session, with Stacy and Robin Renee. I was just so honored to be in a space with powerful Black women who were not scared. It just moved me in ways that I could not have imagined. And so I just think about the Center for Urban Education here at Pitt. We don't often get to live in places where folks push us past whatever the status quo tells us to be. We don't often get to experience that. And for us to experience that through CUESEF every year with criticality, for us to be able to be in community with one another, I'm truly honored by that. And so I just want to spend time in this space thinking about what we can do with this knowledge now that we have it. How do we move forward? How do we build things with it? How do we recover our communities with it? How do we build things that last, things that matter to us? How do we push us forward? I want to spend one moment sharing some things in the chat. If you will at this moment share one reading or music, video, or song that has pushed your critical thinking, one reading that you have read in your entire life from a baby to today, or one song, one thing that has pushed you to think more critically about this world, if you'll share that with us in the chat, and I'll do the same. Folks who just joined us, my ask of the space was that if you would share a reading or a song or a video or anything that has pushed your critical thinking, pushed you to think about this world more deeply, just share a reading with us. I want to open the floor by asking for folks who have been able to sit in on some of the sessions, can y'all tell me one moment for you throughout the entirety of this conversation, one moment for you that felt powerful, that felt important and significant? I would love for you to come off mute and share it with us, or you can share it in the chat and we'll read it. A moment that felt powerful, relevant, significant.
Well, I know one for me was just in our last session when Dr. Dancy asked, like, what can we do to increase Black political will? And that question like sits with me because it's like political education. How do we get it to be popular? Where do we get it? It's been banned in schools. It's been banned in institutions. It's been banned in entire states, public facilities, you know? And so that's just something that I leave here with as an educator, as a historian, as a mother, as all types of things that roles that I perform, play, or that I am in this society. Like, how can we collectively increase Black political will? Because if you don't know that there's a problem, if you don't have a consciousness that you're not free, you know, and, you know, we just have a few days, we'll see people with their flags and thinking freedom rings and all these different things, then how do we disrupt that narrative? Where do we find people who will hear truth? And then their will comes and says, yeah, it's time to take increase my political will, increase my consciousness. I want to know more so that collectively we can move towards freedom, because one of us is just not going to get free. We know this, like it was stated before. LeBron James is a billionaire, but they still write spray paint on his house. It's happened to him. So one person who has succeeded at capitalism is not going to set everyone free.
Oh, no.
And so how do we increase Black political will? That just really, when he asked that question, I was like, whoa, that's big. And it's a challenge, for educators. I mean, because we know that political education, we have to give it out. We have to dish it out. We have to learn and acquire it ourselves to be able to try to transmit it to others and allow others to facilitate their communities and just keep it going and keep it growing until we have a collective consciousness of our political situation.
Absolutely. Indeed. Oh, such a powerful reflection. And we can always count on that good old Dr. Dancer to drop one of them on us, right? Chris, can you talk to me about any moment during this conference? I know you are our illustrious and important MC for the conference. Can you talk to us about any moment that was just significant and relevant for you? Something that made you feel differently or feel deeply?
Yeah. Think that I'm gonna try to make a connection between the mothers panel and the conversation on abolition and education with Sabina, Connie, and Erica Miners. I have notes on what Samaria Rice was giving us, and I want to connect it to something that Connie Woon said in the session right after. But I don't know if y'all remember, she was very, very adamant about trying to get us to understand that the government and politicians locally, nationally, are not doing shit to keep us alive.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I also highlight that what it was that those mothers gave us was probably some of the rawest truths that can exist on this plane.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it is they tell us about power, what it is they tell us about who we can trust and who we cannot trust, who we can believe in and who we cannot believe in, is coming from the lowest point that it can come from, which means that it's expressing, the deepest and most depth and perspective that they can give us. Their babies were taken from us by the state. So they're going to be able to tell us really clearly what the state is and what the state isn't, right?
Absolutely.
So Samaria Rice was telling us, how can we feel like we've made progress when we keep waking up to this? We're being hunted and we have to endure PTSD in our in our being. She said she's angry, she's enraged, and she just doesn't understand how society can continue to do this. And she said these officials aren't making things better. They are poisonous, and the state is destroying our lives and changing our DNA. That's a quote, changing our DNA. And so for me, she was raising a lot of questions about the state and about the government and sort of saying, get the governors out of office, right? But for me, I understood that even a little bit. I would push a little bit past what she was giving us. I think she would agree, but just to say that the state and the government are not viable options to actually end what it is that causes Black suffering. They are reproducers and reformers of that suffering. So real quick, because I don't want to belabor this, but I want to connect it to a point that Connie Woon said when Connie Woon introduced the libidinal into the conversation. Mm-hmm. And what that means is we need to be serious about grappling with the ways in which anti-Blackness, anti-Black violence is so normal, is so quotidian, it's so like everyday normal, invisible, the spectacular, but it also happens in the subtle ways. but she really is asking us to get at the libidinal, which questions psychoanalytically, like, how is this programmed into our brain as normal? Like, how do we understand what it means to be in civil society as inherently parasitic on Black people? So the connection from there is, again, civil society would tell us that the government is where you're supposed to put your trust. You're supposed to vote. You're supposed to participate in the local elections. You're supposed to write your congressman. Don't, if you're not doing this, then you can't act like you out here wanting to do something for Black people. But Samir Rice is telling us, fuck all that. They took my baby, and this is how I've experienced them since. Absolutely. And so for me, again, for me, it's just always really, really important for us to really understand the depth and complexity of this fight that we're in. Like, we have to be invested in learning from pain and suffering and building with and from one another, not just to sort of lay it out there, but for us to actually use it as a map, as coordinates, to understand this is what's not gonna work. Absolutely. This is what's not gonna work. This is who we cannot trust. They drug everybody who needed to be drugged. BLM got drugged through the mud too. But these are the institutions and things that I think that a lot of us actually like believe in. Like, I think that is the miseducation, and I think that was political education. So I'm wanting to connect what I felt deeply is just that they really gave us a sort of lesson in, okay, I can't tell y'all exactly what to do to make this shit stop, but from where I sit, from where those mothers sat, and from where Sabina, Connie, and Erica sat, and what they gave us, the sort of structural analysis, those two things map very clear for me what it is isn't going to work. And I do believe that that is the work of political education. I do believe that that is freedom work, because if we working hard, but we're working toward things that are inherently parasitic upon us, then we're actually not doing the work that we think we're doing. So it just clarifies how we should be going about the work. So I'll leave it there.
No, you stay eating. No, one of the things that I think is so important about that for me is folks will turn around and say, well, how is this education? How does this relate to education? And I think one is a silly question. It's just silly, right? One of my favorite quotes from Elon is, we just started doing all manner of silly shit, right? And I really appreciate that, because one of the right, when folks haven't done deep, rigorous study, when they aren't critical, when they haven't done the readings, and sometimes we don't do the readings, right? We start doing all manner of silly shit. And I think the issue with that is it doesn't move the needle any closer in the direction of power. And sometimes folks will think, those mothers were very candid. I don't know how to make it stop. I don't know how to make it stop. I can love you through it. I can tell you not to accept it. I can tell you to stop being complacent. I don't know how to make it stop, but I do understand the problem deeply. And I think the power of understanding the problem deeply is that then you can understand how you try to you can't come up with strategy and tactic for a problem that you don't understand deeply, right? If you only understand the symptoms of an issue, right, which is a lot of times what we're dealing with, the symptoms of an issue, right? It'll have you out here cuffing it your way to liberation. Cha-cha electric slide into freedom, right? All manner of silly shit. As opposed to thinking about a strategic response to a problem that you know. And what is the problem that you know, right? The problem that I know is that when this Black body goes into space, it is feared. I am always already a monster. And if I know that, right? And if I know that it manifests itself in both subtle and spectacular ways, I can be prepared to deal with the subtlety of it and the spectacular responses that I will receive, right? I know that, there are ways that I move through this world that are not in accordance with what some folks believe a tenure track professor should be moving in accordance with, right? But it is because they are committed to maintaining the social order. They're committed to maintaining civil society and the social order. And I'm committed to breaking it, to short circuiting it, right? And you can't short circuit the machine by giving it more juice, right? You finna give it more power. You finna charge the battery back up, right? You might gotta pour some water on it and let it blow right on up, right? Because that is also praxis, right? There was a video that I saw this morning. In my last session, I showed these young Black girls who were denied their diplomas. There was a video that I saw of another young Black girl at a graduation, and the speaker of the graduation couldn't pronounce her name, couldn't say her name, and so she skipped her. Didn't allow her to say her major, didn't allow her to say what she did, and that baby snatched the mic back. She snatched the mic right on out that presenter's hand, told you her name, her proper name, told you what her major was, what she was doing there, etc. And that's praxis, because that's a disruption to the social order. That says, wait, they wanted this graduation to go business as usual. And they want me to behave in a way that allows it to go business as usual. And I have to, and then left the graduation, absolutely. And I must move in a way that does not continue my own suffering, the perpetuation of my own suffering. I can't keep moving like this, right? When folks hired me to come teach, I can't teach like rich white men teach, because I'm not a rich white man, right? I must teach like in the ways that my grandmother would be honored by, because I love my grandmama more than I love tenure. And I'm not going to embarrass her, right? I'm not going to embarrass my folks. And that's a praxis. That's a freedom praxis. And I think that's what I learned from those mothers this morning, right? What does it mean to honor thy mother, right? To honor her grieving, her suffering, and to sit in it, right? Because joy for me looked like freedom. The best Black joy I could, when that girl snatched that mic out, that lady who did not, that was joyful for me. I was real happy to see her snatch that mic and tell you her name. That made me happy. My joy comes from a freedom praxis. My joy does not come from playing the happy Negro as business continues to go along, right? As you continue to do business as usual. That's not a joyful praxis for me, right? Even if I can do it. All right. And so I just want us to grapple with that for a moment. Any other reflections from the conference? It looks like Dr. Dancy has come off mute.
Well, yeah, I just have one, and this is in conversation with what you just highlighted, Tez, in terms of our opening session as educational, for sure, because we know everywhere, people are having an experience that, is an educational one. Everywhere life is experiencing is educational. But if people were interested in questions about a particular locale or context, I also feel like a question that Sabina had raised with Kevin in their conversation yesterday, which was about how do we think about, on the one hand, a formalized police context that Kevin was in his analysis about formal police, to also thinking about policing within school systems. So a question I would raise as we listen to these mothers is, how do we take, for instance, Samaria Rice's critique of the inadequacies of local government and think about the inadequacies of local government in terms of what might be school board policy, how those are made. And I do think that the mothers talk directly about school boards and school board policy, but also about school governance, how decisions are made, curricular decisions. Every aspect of the ways that people are relating to each other within schools, which also connects us to what our youth were saying yesterday about, not yesterday, but the day before yesterday, about the many experiences that they were having. All the way to a question about how do schools relate to mothers. So the mothers on the one hand of youth who are slain by various forms of state violence are also teaching us about like anti-relational relations, like the ways that they have experienced dozens of relations that have created pain and suffering in their lives. How is that also reproduced by schools?
Yeah.
What a question that comes to mind is, how does your school relate to mothers? How do we as teachers of youth relate to the mothers of those youth?
Mhm.
Like that's a question that implies our practice. So just want to think
A-
with you there about connections.
Absolutely. And I'll let Stacy jump in after this too. Um, as I even think about what it means to be in a teacher prep program, right? I train teachers. That's what I do. Like I get paid to train teachers. And I'm always thinking about how um sometimes I get afraid that I'm not doing them that I'm doing them a disservice, because I'm always like, well, you didn't make no lesson plan in here, or you didn't do whatever in here. And one of the things that I'm always reminded of is that one, why school, right? Look, just even grappling with the idea of why school, right? Or what was the intention of school? And often, and to your point, if you don't understand the relationality that comes up with knowing that those families are connected. And this is what is really critical about teaching Black children. Families absolutely matter, and not just the families that you see as legitimate, right? If my play cousin gets sick, I ain't coming to work either, right? If my auntie who raised me, who ain't my biological auntie, but that was my mama best friend, and she been in my life for a million years, if she die, I'm not coming to work. And I don't care how you feel about that. I don't care what you think about that. I don't care if you've legitimized our relationship, because I don't need you to legitimize it. My life and living has legitimized it. And I think that relational praxis is what makes it very it's different. It's just different. And for folks who don't spend time grappling with those ideas, they start believing that it is degenerate. They start seeing it as degenerate, as a sickness, as an illness, right? Pathological. But those of us who understand the relationality, those of us who understand that education is everything, it's the air, the weather, the water, right? And that anti-Blackness that shows up in it is everywhere, no matter what you do. You can understand a critique like Samaria Rice. Samaria Rice said, y'all want to be slave masters. Her response to the elected officials was, they want to be slave masters. Go back and hear what she said. Y'all don't want to do nothing for us. She said, in my notes, I think I wrote, she said, the people who should love us are not for us. The folks who should be caring for us and taking care of us and protecting us, they are not for us, because they want to be the slave master. They want access to money and capital, but they don't want us to have anything that liberates us, that moves us closer to freedom. And that, for me, that is my mandate, right? I don't wait on the state to send me the requirements, or for a curricular guideline, or for a unit plan to tell me what's next. I listen to a grieving mother whose child was killed by the state saying, I won't do it, and I refuse to do it. And if you care about what I care about, you wouldn't do it either. That's a mandate for me. That's a mandate. That's bigger than the state coming down. That's bigger than the state coming down. That's the takeover I'm looking for. So I think that's the freedom practice that we have to commit to. And Stacey often talks about why she chose Black home education as a response to these systems. And it was not a some folks say, well, people choose Black home education because they can't keep up with the rigors of the school, or they can't do whatever, or it needs to be something. Say, so I chose Black home education because I wanted my kids free and safe. A power in that, right? Stacey, if you can build more on those ideas, but that was powerful for me.
Yeah. You when you spoke about like the relationship that the schools had with mothers, it's just, bring up a lot of things, because you think about how schools alienate Black families, the Black community, by first saying, okay, we're going to hire a bunch of people who are not from your community and import them in and pay them these high salaries where they can afford to commute daily from 2 or 3 counties over. and be outsiders within your community. And so right then and there, you just don't have a family connection. But yeah, when I thought, okay, yeah, I'll take my kids to school and everything was, but it wasn't. You're alienated. When you go, you have police. I know anytime I even go walk up at the school, there's a police car out there. And for many of Black people in America, that does not make you feel safe. Why is this police car sitting in the parking lot, whether it's empty or has someone in it or not? Why is it there? And I know plenty, I can name 2 or 3 schools that's all they do is leave empty police cars in the parking lot. And it's like, well, when you see, when some people see a police car, they're like, oh, it's safe. When other people see it, it's like danger. And so what is the police presence there at school for? And that right there alienates Black families, some Black mothers. So I can't say all Black mothers, that doesn't make them feel safe. I'm saying for me in particular. But yeah, I chose home education for my boys because I wanted to be safe. I wanted to be able to choose a quality education for my children. I didn't want to have to go through a board of education with a bunch of people who do not look like me, do not live the same, have the same experiences in this country as me, and do not have children that resemble my children or in the same situation as my children, saying what my children need to learn. Excuse me.
Such power. Christy, I don't know if you want to come off mute. You can, but if not, I can read your comment. But did you want to come off mute or?
Sure.
Yes, perfect.
Sorry, I just didn't want to interrupt the flow. So
no problem.
Yeah, in the breakout session yesterday that Rachel moderated with the practices of freedom and some of the youth participants, I'm always inspired by Nakaya, but she said many powerful things. But one of them I loved was in her introduction, instead of following the instructions, she, to quote Bell Hooks from Teaching to Transgress, she quoted herself. And it's just an example of the way she moves that inspires me. And I learned so much from her.
Thank you so much for that. And there's a power in that, right? The idea that what does it mean to adapt? Adapt to a lot of folks are saying they are committed to a type of differentiation strategy. A type of differentiation strategy, or they're committed to building systems that folks can respond to, or they're committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then they miss very critical apertures, things that are necessary to understand that, which is what makes somebody feel safe in this space and in this world. What makes them feel heard and valued? And there are a number of reasons why, I've been in sessions where I've known that I have to do this a little differently than what was instructed, because if I do it the way that it was instructed, it won't feel authentic to me. It won't feel real for me. It won't connect with me. And what does it mean for a teacher to know those things, intimately know those things, and be prepared to receive those children anyway, right? To love them anyway. Right. So I wanted to think deeply about that. Any other thoughts or insights or deep moments for you that are resonating from this conference? And then I want you to think about what do we do with this knowledge? What do you build now? What do you do now? What's next for you? You've gathered all this insight, this theory, this knowledge, this rigor, this deep, vast community. What do you do next? What's next for you? I'm thinking for myself, what does it mean for me to connect? I've been working with a group of elders called the Wisdom Seekers here in Pittsburgh, and they are a group of elders who hold study sessions where they study African American history and culture, and they meet regularly a couple of times a month. And they started doing it because they had read a study from Pitt that said that if you study your own history and culture in a group with other people who care about history and culture, it could actually help you curb some of the effects of dementia and other types of psychological and cognitive disabilities that might arise if you do deep, rigorous study in collaboration and in community with other folks. And that's why they came together at first. And now they meet often and regularly. And I went to a session with them in last year in August for their Black August session. And it moved me to see them doing deep, rigorous study together, thinking about what they needed to do to engage the youth to get them in that space. I want to do more work with them in the coming months and years. I want to spend some time meeting other community members in Pittsburgh and figuring out how we can build things together, build things that last. That's important for me. If y'all will share either in the chat or off mute some of the things that you're thinking about now. What's the next step for you now that you know a little bit more than you knew before the first day of the conference? What do you do next for your own practice?
Well, like as we discussed, I'm in Delaware doing GED prep, and it's very disappointing. I have conversations with Stacy and Chris often about, we had Black educational thought, and it's like it's once is you can't go back, and you stay in a state, a perpetual state of anger. And so I teach GED prep here, and part of the section is on social studies, and it's all this white history. It's just crazy. And so instead of me even teaching that, and I guess that's part of my resistance, I'm not teaching that at all. What I've done was I've asked my research siblings to suggest a book. So Chris suggested Autobiography of Assata, and Stacy suggested The Miseducation of the Negro, and I've already brought in Autobiography of Malcolm X. So what we have discussed in beginning our the workshop that we just had, it's like you got GED prep, you got GRE prep, you got SAT prep. We need liberation prep. We need emancipation prep, freedom prep. So I see my role now is as an instructor of those preps, of liberation prep, of emancipation prep, of just spirituality, just in infusing the spirit of African people into the curriculum that I teach. My resistance is not to teach them about Abraham Lincoln, or to teach them really about who's the senators and all that other stuff so they could be good Americans. I don't care about that. I don't want them to be good Americans. I want them to be who America fears.
So powerful. You also brought up something earlier when we were preparing for our session about what happens with these tests. So like for the schools who say, I'm not doing, we're not doing GRE, you can get in without GRE. You talked about how a system then manifests and becomes more violent, right? When they stop doing the GRE and all these other
when they start with the admissions tests, they go from being test optional, from like you can submit an SAT or be test optional, but the test optional requires this level of writing that most urban schools are not teaching, because what they're doing is they're teaching to the test. So you're not taught to critically think, and the test and those admissions writings, those essays require critical thought and critical application, a critical analysis when you answer the prompt. And so that in itself is a racist act, because you got the system over our schools, the system over the curriculum, and they're like, oh no, you got to teach to the test, knowing that the things that you need, if you want to go beyond the test, if you want to go to post-secondary institution, you're not going to have the skill set for it. Yeah, so that's all by design.
It was so important for me because even with as critical as I am, when folks had lifted that GRE requirement and them testing requirements, I was like, oh, that's a good thing. Like more people can get in, more people. And when you reframed that for me the other day and was like, yeah, But now they finna weigh heavily on the writing, and now they finna weigh heavy on,
And, and,
on
and,
other
and
things, other skills that they had not been introduced to or had
right.
not been
And then
utilized.
the other issue is it actually assists the institution because only the people with the highest scores are going to submit their scores.
Mm-hmm.
So now the institutional average has gone up.
Mm.
So when they send their information to the powers that be, it's like, oh, so now you're going to get a group of let's just say traditional students that are going to apply who are not going to get in. So now you go from being 10% selective to 6% selective.
Mm-hmm.
That increases your ranking. Now you're
Mm-hmm.
going from an average of 1200 SAT to a 1450 SAT. That increases your ranking. Those ranking increases equal financial increase in institutional funding.
Absolutely. And changing the mandates. Like, what if we move to, well, how many people got free as a result of your program? Or how many people now have a liberatory praxis as a result of your program, right? That absolutely changes. So maybe folks wouldn't be getting all these awards and winning all these recognitions and all the other stuff that they see as valuable if we reframe the conversation in that way. Kevin posted in the chat about organizing Black History Days of reflection and education. Spending time at the African American History Museum and Culture and History Museum in DC. Got an event coming up Saturday, July 8th, leaving Monroeville at 5 a.m. and going to DC. A cost to participate in it is $75 for anyone who's interested in going to that museum. I think those are important trips for our youth and for other folks who want to get involved in those things. If any of you all know of any organizations that we should know about, that we should care about, will you post them in the chat so that when I copy this chat, I can formally send out some notes. If you know of any organization that has a critical praxis, that has important work, liberatory work, they're doing something that we need to know about, will you post them in that chat so that we can learn them, know them, follow them, look for them? And when I draft up these notes and send them back out to us, they will be included. And I'll also get with folks like Rachel and Elon and see who are already some of the community partners that the center works with, because the center has been doing critical and necessary work in Pittsburgh to build those relationships and bridge those gaps. And I think one of the most disheartening things is when folks don't engage with the work that folks have already been doing, and to get connected with it and think that, oh, I don't even know where to start. Well, you can start at home. Go to the center and see who we already work with and see how we can build stronger bridges with them. Thank you so much, Cause Lecture Series, One Hood, Sisters PGH, United Black Book Clubs. Absolutely. The Abolitionist Law Center. I'm excited to follow some of these groups and organizations and learn more about them. Children's Window to Africa. Oh, wow. Yes. Robin Renee asks, for the families who want to go to the museum trip but cannot afford the $75, is there scholarships available or ways that we can get them?
So can I answer that?
Yes, Gil.
So I'm working on that, Robin. If you just email me, we can stay in touch and I'll let you know about that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If there are any final thoughts or ideas that we can think about, that one gets us closer to freedom, that connects us, I would love to hear them at this time. I'm thinking about freedom, connections, relationality. I'm thinking about insights, anything that we need to know as we draft up highlights and notes from these sessions. And as we conclude.
I think this year be a little bit of retrospective. It's very important because to move forward, we should look back and see and take the good. And so I'm kind of biased here, probably being a historian. I just think, the historical context of what we're doing here with CUESEF, and even largely with, you teacher training and training teachers with history, with Black history, being and making the two fields collide, because it's just a part of the establishment to have all these separate departments when you're dealing with the wide realm of knowledge and knowledge production and separating scholars. Like one is in one building and you had to get permission to seek knowledge from another. When I always bring up Carter G. Woodson, but he was an educator, a historian, and an intellectual. And so all of these are like kind of different fields within within the higher education. But I think being an educator means you are a historian. You should be. You should be trained as one. You should know the history of your field, no matter what you are. If you're an engineer, you should know the history of engineering so that you don't think you're creating something new, reinventing the wheel. But we know, as far as Western thought, that everything that has been discovered by someone from the West, they invented it, but they really recreated the wheel because they had no history of peoples, no history of what was going on in, different regions of the world. It was just their center, the center of their world was the center of the world. And so when they discovered, and I put all this in quotes, something without having the history, it made it seem like it was new. But everything. And so I just want to relate it to CUESEF. It's like going back and having a perspective of what has been the work that has been done in the past, taking that and moving forward is very important, so that we're progressing year to year to year, because it's so important in education that there is some context of what has happened before. We're still all this conversation, especially about the mothers of children that have been slain by the state, just makes me think about the We Charge genocide in 1951. And here we are in 2023, and we're still charging genocide. But when we go back and look at that document, it's charging economic genocide, all types of genocide. And it was to the United Nations, and the United Nations is saying, it was created in 1945. So this comes in 1951 and there's no response, almost like, oh, you have to be an actual country to charge another country. You're citizens within a country charging itself with genocide. But everything that was laid out was true. And when you go read that document, we're not, what we charge here, what mothers are charging today is not new. It's repeating. So our political education, our political knowledge, our historical context must be refreshed, must be solidified, a foundation, because right now, a lot of us don't know the past struggles that we've been through. And so as they continue to reform, the system continues to reform, reconstitute itself, we have to be able to look at media and say, we've seen this before, this did not work, let's try this. But again, we need history, and we need the political will. And I'll just take Dr. Dancy's question and work on that. Just how do we get that political will from people? But I think history and educating teachers with that history and knowledge of, in the past, this was tried. So when you go into your research, you're not saying, oh, this will fix this problem. No, go in with that destruction. How will this destroy and dismantle the system? Because it's been reformed, reconstituted, reshaped time and time again. They've put guitars in the classroom. They put Black teachers in classrooms. They mix the children up in classrooms. But let's talk about this classroom. Let's talk about this room, and so this is what thoughts that I'm having. And I'm very thankful for the reflective session that we had this year that put everything in perspective.
Oh my God. I think I will let Dr. Dancy maybe get a final word, and we can close out this session.
No, well, I was enjoying listening, but I I also wonder if one idea that is emerging for us is about continued study. So a study of purposes, the purposes education should serve, our principles and our practices, and how we might be able to support each other in the work. So we know that many people who might register for CUESEF may be the only one from a school or the only one in a neighborhood or whatever context, and may feel alone. What I've taken away, continue to take away from this forum, though, is that the work for justice is collective work. So that maybe as we move from here, we can think about what are the collective kinds of study that we can create to continue, that maybe connect us, in between CUESEF, so that maybe we're not waiting until the summer, but we're meeting more consistently. And, we may see, the opportunity that is provided by school districts and schools, if people are coming to us thinking more so about schooling practice, that we might actually take advantage of any possibilities that are associated with, professional development, and say, okay, well, for Act 48 credits or professional development, what are the consistent kinds of study opportunities, the consistent kind of courses that we can create where people come, we study together, and people can bring with them issues that they're confronting in their lives, and we can support each other in working through those. And so, if we're doing that, then that suggests a building of something, right? And, there are people who can join us who are educators, broadly conceived, who are not just necessarily working within school context, but are working across every context, since every context is an educational one. And we can, sort of hold up life as we are experiencing it, and also interrogate it and learn from the history of socio-political movements, as people have, endeavored toward freedom and out of these situations. What's the syllabus? I see that popping up in the chat. Yes, professional undevelopment. What are the syllabi that we can create that is actually in response to the questions that we're raising about our lives? And that way we can, collectively support each other in thinking and in organizing, which is what we're talking about. And so that's just what's on my mind, and I'm just grateful for this year's forum. I don't have any formal or closing comments actually prepared for the forum, other than just gratitude. I'm thankful that those of you who are here on the call have stayed here, and that those of you, many of whom are my colleagues who I'm working with every day, have labored and thought with me about what this year's forum might be, and to say, let's continue to stay connected and build. And that if you're not following us or engaged at all in the work of the center, but would like to be, we're really active. We have initiatives happening all the time, study opportunities happening all the time. We're highly collaborative. There are a number of panels and lectures, and all you need to do is go to our Center for Urban Education webpage and click on Contact in our menu, and sign up to stay engaged in our work.
Thank y'all so much. This has been an honor.